Chapter 9. Betrayal and Capture. The cold wind pierced through the night, lifting dust from the ground and carrying away the last traces of warmth from the village. Alya, Karl, and Vivian, along with the remaining mercenaries, took shelter under the dilapidated eaves of an abandoned house. Every one of them was utterly exhausted, yet their eyes remained sharp, filled with vigilance, as if bracing themselves for the next battle. Karl leaned against the icy wall, his forehead beaded with cold sweat. His wounds were worsening, his left shoulder had been slashed open by Night Owl's blade, and blood had long since seeped through his tunic. The relentless flight from day to night had drained his strength, leaving his consciousness teetering on the edge. Alya noticed the pallor of his lips and the raggedness of his breath. She immediately knelt beside him, pressing a piece of torn cloth against his wound, trying to wrap it as best she could. "Bear with it," she said, her voice laced with guilt, her fingers trembling slightly. Karl forced a smile. "I can handle it." His smile sent a sharp pang through Alya's heart. This wasn't just reassurance. It was the same facade he always wore to hide his pain. Ever since she had known Karl, he had been the one charging ahead of everyone, never complaining of wounds, never backing down. But now, deep in his gaze, she saw an exhaustion he could no longer conceal, a hint of despair. How much longer could he endure? Alya dared not dwell on the thought. Vivian stepped inside from the cold, her voice low and steady. "It's safe here for now. We must rest tonight, but we can't stay long. The Black Armor Legion will still be tracking us." Alya nodded, just about to respond when Karl suddenly pushed himself up and staggered toward the door. "Karl?" Alya instinctively reached out to stop him, but he sidestepped her grasp. "I just need some air," he said, glancing back at her with that same familiar smile. But this time, there was something different behind it. Something heavier. Something unreadable. Alya frowned, unease creeping into her heart. She wanted to say something, to stop him. But in the end, she could only watch as Karl's figure disappeared into the night. Karl's steps were slow and heavy as he made his way toward the forest beyond the village. Each step sent a jolt of pain through his battered body, his heart pounding erratically, as though it sensed the danger awaiting him. And the moment he crossed the tree line, a shadow flickered past. Too late. A low, chilling voice murmured in his ear. Cold steel pressed against Karl's throat as dark figures emerged from the shadows. Encircling him, the Black Armor soldiers stood in silent formation. And at their forefront stood Night Owl himself. Clad in obsidian armor, Night Owl was a specter in the darkness, his piercing gaze as sharp as a hunting falcon's, exuding an air of absolute dominance. He approached Karl with slow, deliberate steps, his lips curving into an almost amused smile. "You're a fool," Night Owl murmured. "Wounded as you are, you still dared to wander off alone." Karl remained silent, his fingers inching toward the dagger at his waist. But before he could move, a soldier's boot crashed into his back, forcing him onto his knees. Rough hands seized his arms, twisting them behind him and pinning him to the ground. Night Owl crouched down to meet Karl's gaze, his expression laced with dark amusement. "You do realize, don't you? We've been watching you all along. Just waiting for you to make a mistake, like this one." Karl gritted his teeth against the pain. "What do you want?" Night Owl narrowed his eyes, his voice dropping to a whisper, low and venomous. "What do we want? How naive." His words dripped with mockery. "No matter how far you run, the Empire's reach is inescapable. Alya, she is an existence that should not be. The Empire will not allow her to live." Karl's glare burned with fury. Night Owl chuckled, his amusement deepening. "But we're not unreasonable." At his signal, a soldier dragged forward a bound and bloodied mercenary, barely clinging to life. Night Owl unsheathed his longsword, the blade glinting coldly under the moonlight as he rested its tip against the captive's throat. But his eyes never left Karl's. Listen carefully, Karl. His voice was a whisper of steel, each word carrying the weight of inevitability. You have two choices. He raised two fingers, his expression patient, yet cruel. 1. Surrender, Alya. Give her to us, and I will spare you, Vivian, and the remaining mercenaries. 2. Refuse. In a single fluid motion, he slashed his sword. The captive mercenary let out a wet, choking gasp as blood sprayed into the dirt. His body convulsed once before falling still, lifeless. And they will all die like him. Karl's entire body tensed, his nails digging into his palms so hard they threatened to break the skin. Night Owl studied his reaction with satisfaction, his smirk widening. You're not a fool, Karl. I trust you'll make the right decision. Karl trembled, his breaths ragged. Alya's face flashed through his mind, her unwavering determination, the way she threw herself into battle, her eyes burning with resolve as she bled to protect her comrades. She was the one he swore to protect. But now, if he refused, perhaps Alya could still escape. But Vivian and the others, they would all die. If he agreed, Alya would be captured. And what then? He didn't dare imagine. Night Owl rose to his feet, waiting, knowing the weight of indecision was crushing Karl from the inside. Karl's breath came faster, his fingers trembling violently. It felt like something inside him was breaking apart, splitting at the seams. Finally, he exhaled, long and shaky, his voice barely above a whisper, rough, hollow, and utterly defeated. How can I be sure you'll let them live? A satisfied smirk crossed Night Owl's lips. Good, he murmured. It seems you're finally seeing reason. Karl was imprisoned in a dilapidated stone house, its rough walls steeped in the stench of mold and blood. His hands were bound by iron chains, and his wounds, left untreated for too long, throbbed with a dull pain. Each breath burned like fire. Yet, the worst torment was not the physical agony, but the question General Night Owl had planted in his mind. Hand over Alya, or watch everyone die? The words coiled around his thoughts like a venomous serpent, sinking its fangs into his reason, making escape impossible. Alya. He shut his eyes, and her image surfaced, always stubbornly standing at the forefront, shielding everyone else with her frail body. In her eyes, he had seen defiance, unwillingness, and a loneliness she never spoke of. From the moment he met her, Karl had known that she carried a heavy curse, that her very existence was a disaster waiting to unfold. And he, time and time again, had sworn to himself that he would protect her, no matter the cost. But now, could he still protect her? The iron door creaked open. Night Owl stepped inside, carrying a jug of wine, his demeanor relaxed, as if everything was under his control. The dim candlelight reflected coldly off his black armor, and his sharp gaze pierced straight through Karl, as if reading every ounce of his turmoil. Haven't made up your mind yet? Night Owl asked casually, his tone devoid of impatience. Instead, he seemed to be savoring the psychological struggle unfolding before him. Karl remained silent, staring back coldly. Night Owl let out a soft chuckle, placing the jug of wine on the table before dragging a chair over and sitting down in front of Karl without the slightest hint of caution. His gaze was deep, like someone watching an anticipated performance reach its climax. You know, Night Owl began lazily, I've seen plenty of fools like you. At first, they all swear they'll protect someone. But in the end, they always choose the rational path. Karl's fingers dug deep into his palms, nails threatening to break the skin. Night Owl smirked at the reaction and continued, his voice cutting like a blade. You really think Alya can survive this? Don't be naive. She's nothing but a cursed stray. Even if you throw everything away to protect her, her fate won't change. The Empire has already decided. She must be eliminated. And your so-called protection? It only delays the inevitable. Karl's head snapped up, fury blazing in his eyes. Shut up, he growled, his voice hoarse, raw with rage and pain. But Night Owl remained unfazed, his expression almost amused. His eyes locked onto Karl's, unrelenting. Don't want to hear the truth? Too bad. It doesn't change the facts. He rose from his chair and stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough that it sent a shiver down Karl's spine. If you truly wish to protect her, you should make her death worthwhile instead of dragging everyone else down with her. Karl's breathing grew erratic, his reason crumbling. He wanted to deny Night Owl's words, but then he thought of the fallen. Mercenaries, Vivian's exhausted eyes, the despair in his remaining comrades. Everything told him that Night Owl wasn't just spouting nonsense. If he insisted on protecting Alya, what would happen to Vivian and the others? Would they survive? He didn't dare answer. Night Owl watched his shifting expression and smirked, taking a step back, as if granting Karl some room to breathe. I'll give you time to think, he said, in a tone that was almost gentle, almost coaxing. But don't disappoint me. With that, he turned and left, his final words lingering ominously in the cold air. Time is running out. That night, Karl leaned against the freezing stone wall, his eyes hollow, his mind in turmoil. He thought of all the battles he and Alya had fought together, surviving through snow and bloodshed, pulling each other back from the edge of death. Her trust, her stubbornness, her pain. All of it came rushing back. But if she lived, more people would die. What should he do? His breathing became ragged, his forehead slick with cold sweat. His fingertips trembled. This wasn't just a decision of life or death. It was forcing him to destroy the one thing he swore to protect with his own hands. Alya. She wasn't just a comrade. She was someone he would give his life for. But now, keeping her alive meant condemning everyone else. His eyes squeezed shut. His nails dug into his palm, breaking the skin. Blood seeped between his fingers, but he didn't notice. For a long time he remained still. Then finally he opened his eyes. The torment in them had been replaced with something else, something heavy, something irreversible. He had made his decision. If sacrificing Alya meant saving Vivian and the others, then he would bear this sin. His jaw tightened. He exhaled a shaky breath, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. By dawn, when Night Owl pushed open the iron door once more, he found a man who had finally been broken. Karl lifted his head slowly, exhaustion and pain etched into every fiber of his being. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse, nearly inaudible. I accept. Night Owl smiled in the shadows, satisfied. Good. The night was as dark as ink, with shadows draping the village like a suffocating shroud. The cold wind carried an eerie undertone, slicing through the silence like an invisible blade. The village fires had long since been extinguished, the starlight smothered by thick clouds, leaving the world cloaked in an oppressive gloom. Karl trudged into the village, his steps heavy, his face pale, and cold sweat beading his forehead. The pain from his wounds had long since numbed, but inside, he burned as though consumed by flames. His hands trembled slightly, as if still haunted by the chilling words of Night Owl echoing in his ears. Hand over Alya, and you all get to live. Could he truly believe that? Was this truly the way to secure Vivian and the others' survival? But there was no turning back now. The Black Armor Legion had already taken position, lurking in the darkness beyond the village, waiting for him to take the final step. When Alya saw Karl return, the tension in her brow softened ever so slightly, revealing a fleeting trace of relief. "Where were you?" she asked softly, concern lacing her voice. Karl took a deep breath, steadying himself. Just needed some air. Alya studied him, as though searching his eyes for something unsaid. But in the end, she simply nodded. "You're injured. Don't push yourself," she murmured, reaching out to steady his arm, trying to guide him back toward the dying embers of the fire to rest. Karl lowered his gaze, his fingers curling slightly. The agony within him threatened to consume him whole. At the dead of night, the shadows around the village stirred. Figures moved silently in the darkness, ghost-like forms slipping through the black veil of night. The soldiers of the black armor, Legion moved with precision, their weapons glinting coldly as they sealed off every escape route. The mercenaries reacted swiftly, but it was already too late. "Ambush!" Vivian's voice rang out as she unsheathed her short sword. But before anyone could fully react, gleaming blades sliced through the air. Screams of pain erupted as mercenaries collapsed one after another, blood soaking into the earth. The black armor soldiers pressed in with ruthless efficiency. Alya spun around, sword in hand, ready to fight, only to find a familiar figure blocking her path. Karl. She froze. In the next breath, black armor soldiers lunged forward, seizing her in an iron grip. "Karl, what are you doing?" Alya's voice was low, shaken, disbelief flickering across her face. Karl said nothing, his fists clenched so tightly that his nails nearly pierced his palms. Alya struggled, but the enemy was too prepared. The mercenaries, already battered and few in number, found themselves hopelessly outmatched. Despair settled like a suffocating weight upon the battlefield. Her heart sank. Karl finally lifted his head, his expression carved with pain and guilt. "Alya." His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper, each syllable carrying an unbearable weight. Alya did not lash out, nor did she rage. She only stared at him, her eyes filled with something far heavier than anger. She already understood. "You led them here." Her words were quiet, not an accusation, just a fact. Karl's breath hitched. He wanted to deny it, but the truth had already wrapped itself around his throat, choking him silent. In the end, he could only nod. Alya closed her eyes for a brief moment, her fingers trembling. But when she opened them, again, the shock was gone, replaced by something else. Something colder, something far more dangerous. A flicker of bitter amusement curled at her lips as she turned to Night Owl. "So this is how you operate?" she murmured. "Forcing people into betrayal?" Night Owl stepped forward, a smirk playing at his lips as his eyes gleamed with amusement. "This isn't a trick. It's reality." His tone was light, almost amused, as though all of this had already been predetermined. "Everyone has a weakness. Your friend is no exception." Alya inhaled sharply, her chest rising and falling as she fought to control the storm raging within her. At last, her gaze returned to Karl. She did not curse him. She did not scream. Instead, she spoke in a voice so quiet, so sorrowful, that it cut deeper than any blade. "I won't hate you, Karl." Karl's breath caught, his entire body tensing. "But if you truly believe their promises, then you are far more naive than I ever imagined." There was no anger in her tone, only heartbreak, a painful, quiet resignation. Karl's hands trembled violently. His breath grew unsteady. A horrible, suffocating doubt began to coil around his chest. Had he been wrong? Had he just doomed them all? The battle was already lost. The mercenaries were bound and forced to their knees. Vivian clenched her teeth, fury blazing in her eyes, but beneath it lay desperation. Night Owl watched Alya with satisfaction, his smirk deepening. "Excellent," he murmured, stepping closer. "Alya, your story is only just beginning." Alya met his gaze, her eyes burning with a fury that threatened to consume the night itself. She knew this was just the beginning, and so was her vengeance. Perfect. Night Owl's voice was deep and smooth, like a blade slicing through the night wind, elegant, yet bone-chilling. "Karl, you have completed your task." Karl knelt on the ground, battered and broken. His armor was torn, blood seeping from the wound on his side. He lifted his head slowly, his face pale, his gaze filled with turmoil and pain. "And now," Night Owl continued, "you may claim your reward." Karl's heart pounded violently. His breathing was ragged as he rasped out, "You promised you would spare them." Night Owl smiled faintly, stepping closer until he towered over Karl, looking down at the man who had once been fearless, but was now drowning in regret. "Oh? Did I promise that?" Night Owl raised an eyebrow, his tone laced with mockery. "I only said that if you handed over Alya, they would have a chance to survive. But—" His voice suddenly dropped, turning sharp as a blade. "That does not include you." Before Karl could react, a flash of silver cut through the air. His pupils contracted. The next instant, pain erupted in his chest. Night Owl's sword pierced straight through his heart, the blade emerging from his back, drenched in crimson. Karl froze. His lips trembled as though he wanted to speak, but blood surged up his throat, choking his words into silence. "You—" With an effortless motion, Night Owl withdrew his sword. He gazed indifferently at Karl, watching the life drain from his body as though observing the inevitable conclusion of a tragic play. "Traitors," he said coolly, "have no place in this world." Karl's body stiffened, then crumpled backward. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth, his fading eyes locked onto Alya, filled with remorse and a strange sense of relief. "Karl!" Alya's scream shattered the night. Her pupils shrank in horror, her chest rising and falling rapidly, as if her entire world had collapsed in that instant. Black-armored soldiers restrained her, holding her down, but she fought like a caged beast, desperate to reach Karl. His body lay motionless on the cold earth, blood pooling beneath him. His lips parted slightly, struggling to form words, but in the end, not a single one escaped. His gaze never left her, filled with regret and a silent farewell. Alya felt something inside her snap. Her nails dug into her palms until blood dripped between her fingers, yet she was completely unaware. "Night Owl!" A raw, primal fury erupted from her throat. At that moment, an earth-shattering force exploded from within her. Dark purple flames surged outward like a volcanic eruption, warping the air with their heat. The very ground trembled beneath her feet. The black-armored soldiers recoiled in terror, raising their weapons in a desperate attempt to shield themselves, but the scorching energy instantly shattered their armor and sent them flying. Alya's eyes burned crimson, her entire body engulfed in raging soul fire. The power within her blood surged wildly, breaking free of all restraints. And then, her soul beast awakened. A colossal nether phantom dragon materialized behind her, its massive form towering over the battlefield. Its glowing blue eyes burned. With unquenchable fury, and with a deafening roar, it sent shockwaves rippling through the night. Night Owl's expression remained composed, though his gaze darkened slightly with interest. "It seems," he murmured, a flicker of amusement dancing in his voice. "You've finally awakened." But Alya was beyond reason. Hatred and vengeance had consumed her entirely. The black chains binding her limbs strained under the sheer force of her power, the metal groaning as cracks spread along their surface. The air around her vibrated, her soul flames scorching everything in their path. Then, just as she was about to break free, Night Owl lifted a hand and murmured an incantation in an ancient, arcane tongue. A crushing force descended upon her. It was like an invisible cage slamming shut, locking her soul in place. Agonizing pain tore through her very core, as though something vital was being ripped from her. Her soul beast howled in fury, thrashing against the unseen bonds, but its form began to waver, its flames flickering and dimming. Bit by bit, the mighty Nether Phantom Dragon faded, its power forcibly sealed away. Alya gasped, her body trembling as she collapsed to her knees. Cold sweat dripped down her face. She could feel it, her strength, her very essence, locked away. Night Owl gazed down at her, satisfaction curling his lips. "This time," he said softly, his voice a whisper of finality, "you have nowhere left to run." Alya clenched her teeth, fury burning in her eyes, but her body refused to move. Night Owl lowered his hand and gestured to his soldiers. "Take her." A group of armored men stepped forward, roughly seizing Alya's arms and dragging her to her feet. Even in her weakened state, her eyes blazed like a wildfire, refusing to break. She would survive. She would endure. And one day, she would end this.